Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into a really fascinating case study in accidental brilliance. Look, we've all done the wrong thing for the right reasons at some point, right? But what if you did the exact right thing for entirely unapologetically selfish reasons? We're going to break down how Princess Mia Luna Tearmoon uses completely self-serving motives to execute these absolutely brilliant political maneuvers and, literally avoid the guillotine.
To really get Mia, you have to understand her one singular hidden motivation: absolute survival, at literally any cost. Every single action she takes, no matter how incredibly noble it looks to everyone else, actually just stems from her absolute panic over a gruesome execution she already experienced in a previous timeline. She is 100% determined to rewrite her tragic ending, and she is putting herself first above everything else.
So, we are going to look at her strategic playbook through these 5 steps: rewriting a tragic fate, choosing the underdog prince, the maid and the rescue, masterful diplomacy with Rafina, and an accidental compassionate leader. All right, kicking things off with step 1, rewriting a tragic fate.
The thing you have to keep in mind is that every action Mia takes, no matter how graceful or compassionate it appears on the outside, is driven by this internal, visceral panic over a gruesome fate. She actually calls it the guillotine route. She knows exactly what behaviors led to her kingdom falling apart and her own execution in her past life. So because of that, every smile, every single dance, every conversation, it's all a highly calculated social maneuver designed to step just a little bit further off that fatal path.
Moving right along to step 2, choosing the underdog prince. Let's look at this super interesting dynamic between two royal brothers. On one hand, you've got Prince Sion. He's highly talented, confident, basically the traditional ideal partner. But on the other hand, there's Prince Abel, an underdog who completely lacks confidence and honestly believes he's never going to surpass his brother. Well, in a very public setting, Mia actually rejects the talented Sion's dance invitation. Instead, she calculates that Abel, the underdog, is actually the real key to her survival. And when she approaches Abel, she hits him with this incredible line. She tells him, "If you don't match today, then tomorrow, stack up your efforts day by day until you reach your goal." She's saying this to build his confidence, letting him know that even a quote-unquote second-rate prince can carve out his own path. I mean, on the surface, that sounds incredibly altruistic, doesn't it? It sounds exactly like a truly compassionate leader empowering the struggling peer. But here is the kicker. Her internal monologue reveals a completely self-first mindset. She just needs him to not be blocked by his highly capable brother when she eventually needs an army. She realizes that in her original timeline, Abel's lack of power meant he couldn't send military reinforcements to save her from the revolution. So she isn't inspiring him out of the goodness of her heart. Actually, scratch that. She's essentially pre-ordering an army for a future crisis. Which brings us to step 3, the maid and the rescue. Okay, so the context here is this really vicious bullying tactic. These Central Imperial nobles set a trap based on some deep-seated prejudice against their countryside peers. They kidnap Leora, who is the servant of a countryside noble named Tiona Rudolph, and they literally steal Leora's dress. The goal is brutal but simple. They want to prevent Tiona from attending the dance and allegedly staining the honor of the Empire. It's a super tense situation, but Mia accidentally sets a whole counterplot in motion without even realizing the specifics of the crime. This is where it gets brilliant. It perfectly illustrates how Mia's incredibly simple instruction cascades into a flawless rescue mission. Before the dance, Mia just gives her loyal maid, Anne, a bit of money to use freely, mostly just to get her out of her hair while she's prepping for the party. But Anne interprets this as a secret 4D chess command. She genuinely believes Mia has already anticipated a crisis. So, during the climax of the dance, Anne uses those funds to buy a new dress, teams up with another servant named Keithwood to orchestrate a rescue, and completely ruins the noble scheme. Tiona and Leora get to attend the event in total triumph.
Now for step 4, masterful diplomacy with Rafina.
Now, if she has all this authority as a princess of the empire, and these nobles committed a literal crime against her newly rescued acquaintances, you really have to ask, why didn't she just expel the culprits herself? It seems like the obvious right thing to do, doesn't it? It's kind of like a classic workplace dilemma. Do you ruthlessly punish the toxic star employee and risk intense backlash, or do you find some clever workaround?
Well, directly punishing them is actually a massive trap. If she takes the guillotine route and enacts direct punishment on these high-ranking central nobles, she's going to incur their deep-seated resentment.
And remember, those are the exact same elites who might overthrow her later on. Punishing them leads her right back to the executioner's block. So she's forced to find a diplomatic loophole, which leads to her inventing what we'll call the mercy route.
Her solution? It's an absolute masterclass in deflecting blame. She essentially passes the buck by declaring that Lady Rufina is the true ruler of this academy. Mia cleverly shifts all the responsibility for the disciplinary actions, like sending the perpetrator's servants back to the Empire and putting the students under house arrest, straight onto Lady Rufina. By doing this, she completely dodges the noble's anger, framing the whole punishment as something she's just forced to do out of respect for Rufina's jurisdiction.
Let's break down how this builds into a true diplomatic masterstroke. Step 1. She frames the punishment as a necessity to satisfy and protect Lady Rufina's academy. Step 2. She acts as a mediator, practically begging Rufina to be lenient and avoid fully expelling the guilty nobles. And Step 3. The big payoff. She successfully turns a former political adversary, Rufina, into a powerful friend. By playing the mediator, Mia completely outmaneuvers the political trap, all while looking like a total saint to everyone involved.
And that leads us to our final step, an accidental compassionate leader.
The irony here is just delicious. According to Rufina, this was a mercy-filled punishment designed to encourage the perpetrators to grow. Rufina buys it hook, line, and sinker. She perceives Mia's desperate, sweat-inducing attempt to avoid the noble's resentment as this profound display of wisdom and kindness. Because Mia sold the idea that true punishment should heal the victim and reform the attacker, Rufina is so moved that she actually asks to be Mia's friend. So the huge takeaway here is that her fate is successfully rewritten. By combining her manipulation of Prince Abel to secure future armies, the totally accidental rescue orchestrated by her overly trusting maid, and her shifting of blame to Rufina under the guise of mercy, she has completely rewritten the script of her life. She navigated the treacherous social waters of the academy and managed to evolve, at least in the eyes of everyone else, from a selfish princess into a figure widely perceived as a wise and compassionate leader.
And that brings us to a really fascinating final thought. When you see how seamlessly Mia's absolute self-interest translates into public adoration, it really leaves you wondering, how often does history mistake a desperate, selfish survival tactic for the brilliant strategy of a legendary, compassionate leader? What other historical acts of grace were actually just someone desperately trying to save their own neck? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. And hey, keep questioning the motives behind the history you read.